Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of CleanTechies, the podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 13, or if you're counting from the beginning, Episode 25. As always, please do like, subscribe, and give a review for the podcast so we can help grow the show and share what's going on. Quick reminder as well that this show is sponsored and made possible by NextWave Partners. NextWave is passionate about working with people and organizations to drive the transition towards a sustainable and innovative future. NextWave Partners creates opportunities and shapes markets globally by providing elite human capital solutions. So if you're looking to grow your career, looking to grow your team, either way, please reach out to NextWave Partners. You can reach out to them a couple different ways. You can reach out to them directly by email at info@next-wavepartners.com. You can also go to their website, find a consultant that works within your space, and reach out to them through there. The website is next-wavepartners.com. As well, want to make mention to our other sponsor, Tigo Energy. Tigo, we hear from more at the end of the show, but we're very happy that they're helping us to make this possible. So with that, let's get into today's episode. Today's episode was with Edi Demaj, co-founder of KODE Labs out of Detroit. Very interesting conversation with Edi. We discussed several topics around the smart building space and technology in general and kind of just climate change. And I think the two most interesting things in this conversation were mainly, at least to me, the increase of building value through creating an eco-friendly and smart building. When you kind of implement those processes into your building, the valuation aspect of those buildings and kind of what the lease values end up being, that was very interesting to me. We also talked a lot about the idea of transparency in the space of prop tech technologies. I think it's just very interesting kind of the evolution that has gone through. So Edi was able to help us understand a lot about the space. A very interesting conversation in general. Very excited to bring this to you. So with that, let's get into the show. All right, welcome to the show, Edi. How's it going today?
Going good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I really appreciate you coming on today. So I guess for everybody, why don't you just start off by giving us a bit about your background and maybe some of your accomplishments? You have quite an interesting background from what I can tell.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate you having me. So by way of background, I'll kind of start, way back, and I'll try and keep it as concise as I can. But so Edi Demaj, I moved to U.S. I'm originally from a small country out in Eastern Europe called Kosovo. Moved to U.S. in 1999. There's quite a bit going on in Kosovo in 97, 8, and then into 99. I was fortunate enough to kind of have the opportunity to move to U.S. Living through a war, making it out alive with my immediate family, and then having the opportunity to move to U.S., which has been literally the greatest thing that's ever happened to my whole family. And then moving here, at 14, with my younger brother and my parents, it's a new life. It's a new way. But this country has kind of a way to, the whole boiling pot, analogy that's used. That's really how it's worked for us. I went to school here and then became fascinated with real estate at an early age and technology, but real estate first. And the reason why is I had a mentor and a coach of mine who I met early on in my life in the U.S. who was, big in real estate. And, us moving here as immigrants, you don't have a whole lot of money. You're getting started. And this guy had it all. At least to me, he had it all. And so we became, both myself and my younger brother, who's my co-founder in KODE Labs, became fascinated with real estate. We thought that, real estate was kind of the way to, a good life. So that's how we got into, real estate early on. But along the way, co-founded a couple of companies, started with software development, started a survey company that failed, and then got into the buying and selling part of real estate on the residential side. Co-founded a company with my brother and another guy, Justin, in there. Grew that to be to get in the top 5 brokerages in Michigan, then expanded to Florida. My brother and I then exited that. My brother went on to work for a company in the building integration space became a partner and the chief operating officer there at a very young age, probably the youngest in that space, frankly. And I went on to work for one of the large real estate companies that was getting started in Detroit, founded by Dan Gilbert, who's the founder, chairman of Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans, and Cleveland Cavaliers, and so on. So I went out there and worked there, and talk about real estate learning on the fly. It was incredible because we were like, his whole focus was, I'm going to bring the city back, and I'm going, like, in order to do that, we have to essentially update, upgrade, attract people to these buildings. So we were buying not in a traditional way where the only due diligence was that it was Dan's vision that if we do this, they will come. Not like, I buy this building, I do due diligence, what am I, how am I going to be able to underwrite this, so on and so forth. So we were literally like buying, it was startup with, unlimited funds. So we were buying and, pouring billions of dollars into the city, buying these buildings, updating, upgrading them, pitching them, then businesses started to move there. So did a ton, in that space. And along the way, co-founded a company by the name of Rocket Fiber, which was, the idea was we wanted to start by upgrading the city infrastructure, tech infrastructure in Detroit, and then expanding from there. And he was inspired by what Google Fiber was doing, out in Kansas City, and then kind of expanded to a couple other cities. So myself and two other guys, Mark and Randy, pitched that to anybody that would listen to us. Worked on that, after our regular jobs, and finally got in front of Dan and pitched him on it, and then ended up raising what literally was probably still to date the biggest seed funding, almost $32 million, just like right off the bat. And with just an idea, like a pitch. We had nothing because it was an infrastructure play. Like, we hadn't built anything. We just put a plan and, all these things that we worked on a bunch of due diligence. So anyway, raised that and started building that company in 2014. Worked that for about 6 years. Grew it beyond Detroit, had plants literally all over the U.S. And then exited in 2020 to a company by the name of Everstream, which is owned by Amp Capital, one of the big PE firms in the world on the infrastructure side. But we did a lot of like smart city stuff there. We're getting into buildings, figuring out how buildings get connected. How do you lay out an infrastructure that allows for all these things that I'm sure we'll get onto here later. So while I was doing that, my brother Etrit was, at the company I mentioned earlier. And what they were doing with that company was they would go into these buildings, look at all the different, core building systems, and figure out how do we like integrate them into, a single pane of glass, but existing single pane of glass. And they hadn't built their own. They were essentially reselling somebody else's, but where you had some room to make some tweaks on it. And obviously my brother and I were still, investing and doing a bunch of other things, on the side. So we talk about it time and again, and over time during our conversations, we always felt that there was a better way there. And the more we dove into it, both on my side from an infrastructure, networking standpoint, as well as on his side from a building systems perspective, it just seemed too crazy, too complicated. Like, how could this be in this, insanely big opportunity that things are so complicated? And then Etrit left the company that he was with around 2017, and we decided to start KODE Labs. So I'm at Rocket Fiber, we start KODE Labs. Etrit is 100% on KODE Labs. The idea with KODE was late 2017. The idea was, okay, we had a plan for what we wanted to build with regard to the core platform, and then a vision for where we wanted to take it. But you had to build, a good base platform to start. So we went there, started that company. It was, Etrit and myself that essentially kind of seeded it, and started building, recruited a team, acquired actually a software development team, brought them in, and then started building this platform with KODE Labs. And, it took us, about a year to get like a decent base. Then I've been building on top of that. And over the last year and a half, we've been going really, really hard because the platform has gotten to a place where now we're comfortable expanding globally. And now we're, at 2020, I exited Rocket Fiber. I'm on KODE Labs now full time with Edi and the team. And the team has grown to about I think we're like 65 team members now. We have 2 offices, one in Detroit, which is our headquarters, and then one in Kosovo, which is where we're from, and where we have part of our team. The name itself, KODE, K-O, stands for Kosovo, D-E stands for Detroit, because these are kind of like the 2 places that are close to both Edi and I, and really the rest of our team now, because that's where we're based. We're extremely passionate about finding ways to give back to these 2 places specifically, but then helping the country that gave us so much holistically, as well as the country we come from. But like now it's turning into this like global thing. Like now we're doing business in the US and Canada, we have Australia, we're starting UK, looking at the rest of Europe. So it's been an interesting last few years, especially last year and a half or 2. So that's by way of that's my background.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely fascinating. There's so many things we could unpack here. I think we'll have to focus on maybe a couple things. I first will comment, obviously, I don't know if many people know this from listening to my podcast, but I love Detroit. I know we talked about it before the show, but Detroit's such a cool city with so many interesting people doing really amazing things, in my opinion. So I think it's great you guys are. It doesn't surprise me that you want to pour back into the city. Let's put it that way. Actually, this might be a good way to take the topic here is, there's a lot of things we can unpack here with IoT and kind of the environmental emission side of buildings. Like obviously your platform, I'm assuming, kind of pulls a lot of this data together and it allows people to see what's going on. But I'm curious, maybe first on the macro, what do you see is happening with cities? And I don't know if Detroit is a good example, but just want to see like how are cities transforming to become a smarter city and to just kind of build the future of cities.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there, right? I am coming from the, back with my Rocket Fiber, background, and then what we're doing with KODE Labs. There's a lot of talk about, smart cities. There's a lot of movement. I mean, frankly, now there's a lot of funds that are being allocated to that from all governments and entities right across the world. It's exciting to see, how that's being pursued. But personally, I feel that a lot of times when I'm reading about things, I feel that it gets overcomplicated quite a bit because you have a lot of people that are now jumping into the space who actually don't have the practical experience in the space. It's more of just theories. And then that has been taken advantage by some companies, especially ones that have been here for a long time, because they know the space much better than the newbies. And now there is this like, yes, we have to get smarter. Yes, we have to do this, but we have to pay a gazillion dollars to do it. And while infrastructure is not cheap, coming again, like having been in that space for a while, it's definitely not cheap. It also is definitely not crazy overcomplicated. So at the end of the day, I think governmental entities do, for the most part, a horrible job of negotiating how to get their city up to par with this whole idea of like having a smart city, having the resources, having the infrastructure, so on and so forth. I mean, I can tell you, I've been personally involved with multiple cities, talking to them and how they were pursuing it, and it's literally complete insanity to me in the way that they pursue it. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just like I don't know how to be a doctor. Like I could talk about it theoretically, but I don't know how to do it. So you see this like I'm going to go and hire the head of smart cities for the building for the city, and he or she is going to coordinate everything. And some of them mean well, but it's like, man, like governmental entities and the bureaucracy there, I feel like it's just continues to keep us down. And frankly, the last thing I'll say there is that, so yes, there's a huge movement towards it. Yes, it's exciting. extremely overcomplicated by most, unnecessarily, in my opinion. And also the idea of like we're going to need 16 years to do this is completely in my opinion, shouldn't be that, but it's lack of coordination between the private and the public sector, in my opinion. And then the last thing is, as a person that's extremely passionate, like a proud U.S. citizen, and the person that wants to see U.S. continue to lead, it's extremely concerning to me how slow we're moving with some of these things. And yes, there's a huge movement again of like allocating funds, but just allocating funds is not going to solve for it, in my opinion. I think it needs a strategy that is a strategy that, frankly, some other places around the world have taken and have been successful at. And why not take that and see where we can make it better, but continue to drive a bit faster? I continue to believe that we will figure it out, as we always have in US. But I think we're overcomplicating it just a little bit right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting. I mean, I've talked about this several times with other people, is the relationship between the government and the private sector, right? And how we can speed that up, how we can make sure, because obviously you've been in many startups, right? You understand that the people you hire are very important, right? And I think that there just happens to be a tendency that the people who apply for government jobs are a certain type of person who's not necessarily there to probably make a huge impact. They're probably just there because it's stable, et cetera. So I think that that's something interesting, and I'd be keen. It's probably a whole nother conversation, to be honest, to talk about how that could be fixed. But maybe let's move on now a little bit more to focus on the product. So could you, just in basic terms, recap again, what is your product? Explain it like you're explaining to somebody who understands nothing about the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So KODE Labs, we've built essentially an operating system for buildings and real estate portfolios that allows for integration of all systems, starting with core building systems, think HVAC, fire, lighting, your generator, your core infrastructure, and then expanding beyond that to your IoT and really any other operational software, whether you're talking or system, whether it's access, whether it's your work order system or whatnot. It's taken all of that. So this operating system we've built is a vendor agnostic open operating system that allows for integration with all these systems, plugging them into our operating system, and then having an ontology on the background where all this data that is coming into Code OS, which is our code operating system, is structured in a way that allows for use of that data to drive both energy and sustainability goals, as well as unique experiences in these buildings for the tenants, the people that live, work, play, visit these buildings. So that's our core product.
Got it. So I'm curious about how difficult has it been to create something that has the ability to have anything integrated to it, right? Because since I'm assuming there's no gold standard for these building systems. How have you been able to do that? Have you had to work with the other vendors to maybe adjust things to make that possible? I'm just curious on that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, frankly, it's quite difficult because, again, you have a lot of companies that have been in the space for a long time. Some of the big guys who, the way they sell is that, at least traditionally, historically, has been, you need to buy everything from me, because unless you buy everything from me, it becomes very hard to kind of tie things together. And then, from a building owner perspective, you have to figure out how to make this work financially for you. So if you end up with a, fire system that's from Siemens and an HVAC that's from, Johnson and whatever else from somebody else, you now are living in multiple different places. And the cloud as a concept has just not existed until just recently in this space. Mm-hmm. So if you think of like everything that you and I do every day, really frankly lives in the cloud, right? And in this space, it's been siloed inside buildings and in basements and in different rooms and computers and all these other things, right? So when we started digging more into this, we had to kind of go, okay, what's the path of least resistance to start? that allows us to like tap into some of these buildings. And you have companies like Tritium Niagara and some of these other companies who have built some, good hardware that allows for some of these systems to come in, but then it's okay, you take it from that to the cloud and, build your custom drivers, normalize data, all these other things. So yeah, it hasn't been easy. I will say that it's getting easier, and it is getting easier because of what happens in every industry and space. It's once startups start to like tap into the space, they think of new ways, different ways to like attack the space. And also the real estate owners and managers have gotten, more educated over time. So now they're going, look, I have no issues buying from you, but I need you to be able to integrate with this, or I need you to be able to integrate with that. So we're starting to see like a movement, a change there that is helpful. I think we still have quite a bit of ways to go as an industry, but from our perspective, we knew that software could solve this issue of like, we can solve for new buildings. Great. All these companies, they're trying to build new stuff, new hardware, blah, 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 blah. But the existing buildings is still the majority of the problem. And we thought that software could be the solution to that. And we still believe in that. We're seeing now, we're proving it. And, we believe that the companies that build hardware, which is a whole other thing, they're good at building the hardware. They just haven't been good at software. So now, okay, let's bridge that gap, which is what we're doing now, of taking the hardware, adding software that is really truly, on par with where we should be today. And then, those once you tie those things together, you can now use all that to drive these goals and these things that everybody is talking about, right? Again, I still think we have ways to go as an industry, but from our perspective at KODE Labs, I think we've been very successful in not just building it, but actually proving it. Like it's not stuff that we talk about, and the only way you see it is if you pay us $1 million. Like, we're happy to show it anywhere, anytime, go through the data, see exactly how it works, what we're doing, because we think the space is big enough, and we don't think that there's really anything to hide there. So that's I guess to summarize it, yes, it's been difficult. I think it's starting to get a bit easier now that we have a platform that is, in our opinion, really truly unique in driving these things. And we're going to continue to push the industry holistically to force this like idea of really truly openness. Like, to hand off an API is not a hard thing, literally on like 98% of all industries. To hand off an API in our industry is like rocket science. We don't have it. It's this way. It's that way. It's like, it doesn't need to be that. Like, building APIs has been done for decades now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the thing that interests me in this is how, obviously, you mentioned hardware companies might not have been good at software, right? But if you are open and transparent about this stuff, I think that you actually drive more demand for your product in the end, because now hardware companies can say, actually, thank you for having the software. I don't need to have it. I'll just integrate with yours. Here's our product, right? And then they can even be better at that, which also allows building owners to have, there's going to be a more competitive market, because everybody, one company doesn't have to provide all the services, right? They can do what they're best at, or the best 3 things, and then leave the rest to somebody else, and it can all integrate. So this is interesting to me. It's obviously a huge space. I think it is. There's obviously many moving parts, and it can be complex at times, but I'm curious to change the topic a little bit more to once a building owner has this data, how, I like to talk about the financial returns here. Like, what is the model that you guys have? How can building owners benefit financially from this? Obviously, I think we're looking at the potential of carbon emission taxes, like stuff like that. What are you just seeing there? I want to understand kind of the economic side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, as you know, whenever there's been a conversation about smart buildings, integrations, automation, all these things, the question or the difficulty has always been in the cost to do these. Because again, historically, we've known the cost of hardware. We can include that in our underwriting of the building when we do the planning, budgeting, projecting of the building. But the issue Now, the second you get into this like idea of, okay, now we need to integrate these and do this, and the costs have been so high that in most cases, it's been frankly very, very difficult unless the owner just wanted it. It's been very, very difficult for them to make sense of it because the ROI has never been quantifiable historically. Now, as time has gone on, especially over the last few years, we're starting to see more focus on, hey, yes, you can do this, and here's where you're going to get some of the ROI, which is great. From our approach to the space has been, we need to disrupt not just the ability to integrate any and all systems as a plug and play, but it also needs to be done in a way where when we talk to an owner, it is not, again, back to my like crazy complicated pitch that is made. It doesn't need to be a complicated pitch, and it can be quantified for the owner in a way that they understand it without being a control specialist or IT specialist or whatever the case may be. And the way that we've approached that is we needed to make sure that, again, we have a platform that is open. We have a platform that can handle these integrations. Once we integrate with one thing once in a portfolio, we should be able to do that repeatedly in really any portfolio in a way that speeds up the process. That drove us to build an application, a product that we've built inside KODE Labs, which is the only one of its kind in our space. That is, we call My MSI, but in essence, it's an application for master systems integrators. So, and what it does is it helps with everything from how you intake information in, whether it's an existing or new construction. So taking all of that data, having it normalized into this platform, so you already start to create this digital twin of data for any building or portfolio, and then tying that to our operating system so you can go, okay, you said everything, like here's everything that's supposed to be there. Great. We've documented everything down to like warranties and dates and, the whole 9 yards. Now we tie that to our operating system that integrates with the actual building itself to check against that and go, okay, everything that you said is there and or is supposed to be there. Is it actually there? Let's now do this digital commissioning. And in the event that it's not, and it's a completely fully automated process, in the event that that's not done, make sure that we're sending a report that's concise that says, hey, here's what's missing. Once this is checked, literally all you have to do is check it on here. We run it again, confirm that it's there, and it's rock and roll. What this does is it speeds up this idea or this concept of being able to integrate with all these systems, which everybody else does very manually. I push PDFs, I push a link, I download a bunch of paperwork, I go through it. Now I have some actual human that goes around trying to do this whole, check-in all over the place from a commissioning perspective. We zoned in on that, laser focused on that. How do we speed up that process? Because speeding that process up means that we can now do these things in a cost-effective way. And then once that cost is lowered, then it's like, okay, how do we now use actual data science and engineering to, as all this data is coming in, to take advantage of this data to drive quantifiable ROI, which is what we're doing, where it's like, okay, now over the past year, you've been spending X amount of dollars in energy, Y amount of dollars in maintenance. And again, these are all like hard numbers. It's easy math. It doesn't even require a crazy mathematician to run through these. And then go, okay, now we've integrated your building. And from the day that we've integrated your building and we turn these optimizations on, we now can look back and go, okay, you were spending $10 a year. Previous to this, you are now spending $5. The cost of doing this was, $6. So you're going to get your money back in 13 months or whatever the case may be. Our goal as a company is to provide a return on investment in existing buildings in 12 or less months. So when we do the pricing and looking at that, again, it's very, very data driven. But then you also have the balance of, I want all these experiences enabled, which some of the clients want. So you have to make sure that you're balancing all that. But again, to summarize, the whole idea of being able to integrate with any system and normalize this data is that you have the ability now to take advantage of that data to drive these different goals that may be in place. Some have risk mitigation, some have energy savings. Some have a balance of both. Some have, I want to be able to pitch the building as a smart building and be able to now charge more versus a building next door that doesn't have that. And again, we still have the issue of owner incentivization, which is a lot of buildings are, the way they're leased is in a way that all the costs related to energy are passed on to the tenants. So, I, the owner, may or may not be incentivized to really drive energy costs down. You need to give me more than just that to incentivize me, which is why we have built all these other tools on top of our operating system to do things like, hey, now your maintenance is a lot better. Now the way you operate a portfolio of 100 buildings is completely different, because literally everything is like Instagram. Everything is on your phone and you can manage it from anywhere in the world, and you don't have to run around. You actually are fed everything you need to look into manually, and things that can be done via a cloud environment control. You can just do that from your phone or your computer. And that's been our approach. Our model is very, very simple. It's we deploy the tools that we have into the building, and it is based on the number of data points and systems that are integrated into our platform. And then from there on, it's your typical SaaS model. And then the last thing I'll say on that is that in the event that in the future you say, look, KODE Labs, you've been great, but now I found somebody else that's better. Everything that we do is literally a plug and play. It's just, we just point it to the next person or the next company, and they can pick up from there. It is not a complicated process at all in the way that it's been traditionally, and frankly still is in most scenarios. The idea is, look, once we do this, you should be able to do whatever you want. If you want to stay with us, and as long as we're delivering what we say we're going to, then great, you should keep us around. The moment you find somebody better, you should be able to do a plug and play with somebody new without us getting in the way of that.
Yeah, this is interesting. So I think two things. I just wanted to recap, first of all, what you talked about, just to summarize for people. So it sounds like generally, once this data is all kind of being collected in the building is integrated, you can then reduce costs of existing things, right? So not only are you reducing costs, but you also mentioned, and it's actually something I just wrote about. I just wanted I'm glad to hear it from somebody who's in the space, that you can then charge an additional, possibly a premium on your building if it's a carbon neutral building, or if it's a smart building that's offsetting its energy. So to me, I just want to recap that, because that to me is very interesting. That is a double whammy on the benefits there. But then obviously you mentioned the incentives, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on the incentives, right? You mentioned that you guys aren't trying to lock people in and stick them to your platform, because that, in my mind, that shows to me you're incentivizing yourself to make sure that you are always providing the best service and nobody's going to want to leave. And you also talked about the building, maybe the leasing agents or whatever, passing the costs down. Could you just talk about your thoughts on the incentive structure in general, and maybe broadly, maybe narrowly on this, whatever you want to talk about? But to me, the incentive structure of how we're going to change kind of this or fix this climate issue is very interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a person who's had to literally, or has been involved in everything from buying buildings to working on, budgeting and underwriting and projecting and leasing and, what can we do? How can we do this? What we at KODE Labs do is we provide a way to have your building be a true smart building without it costing, a huge amount of money. And furthermore, being able to get the money that you're paying back in that very short period of time that, we target that 12-month period, so that to the owner, this becomes a no-brainer. Now, when we talk about, how do you incentivize the owner to, want to pursue this? And if you just talk about energy savings, look, it's great. And if the tenants are asking for it, they're certainly going to do it. But again, because those costs are passed on to the tenants, it's not the biggest incentive, other than you want to do good for the, for the world and the globe, if you're in that, in that mindset. So you have to give more than that. And the way that we give more than that is by saying, look, you now can operate your building more efficiently. you now can save on maintenance costs. You now have the ability to use this data to create and enable these different user experiences that drive both energy savings, save on actual runtime of all these different systems, which is a capital cost to the owner in the event that those systems break. And then the pitch of a smart building is really, really interesting. So back in the day when I was with Rocket Fiber, there are studies, that have been going on for, I think, 12, 13, 14 years now, where if your building has good connection, specifically fiber to the building, the value of that building, when you go to, lease, rent, pitch, should go up somewhere in the range of 5 to 8%. Now, you layer on, now I have the building fully automated. I drive the energy costs to the bare minimum, or I'm carbon neutral, whatever the case may be. I have all of these smart use cases enabled inside my building. What we're seeing with our clients from what they underwrite the building at, they've now been able to charge upwards of 15, 20% more on leases, which when you think from a real estate investment perspective, your traditional REIT is targeting 7, 8% return on their investment. You're now saying, look, by investing here, not only are you going to get your money back, here in a very short period of time, but when you pitch it to companies like Salesforce and Google and, all these sophisticated, high-tech companies that actually care about sustainability, they're willing to pay more for the unique experiences and for an energy efficient building. So your return on investment as, the head of investments for, a real estate company or REIT just changed drastically. Frankly, if you care zero about automation, smart buildings, energy savings, and only care about the money, we can make that pitch too. We'll literally integrate everything. We'll help, and we do this with a lot of our clients, we'll help put these presentations in. We're not pitching with our clients when they're leasing new buildings and explaining these. And the average we're seeing with our clients is 20+% higher return compared to what the building is originally underwritten at. And people are like, that's insane. But look, we at KODE Labs are never going to lease space in a building that is not automated, that is not integrated, that is not smart, that doesn't have the energy efficiency that we think is right. And we're willing to pay more for that. Because if you charge me more for rent, but my energy bill is lower and my CAM charges are lower, it's fine. Like the net is an extremely better experience, a better world, a cleaner world, and I'm actually not happier team members. So the net cost, I'm actually at a positive now. But this is the thing that I think the real estate space, in particular owners, managers, are still getting educated on. And frankly, the industry as a whole, because your traditional companies in our space didn't pitch it this way. They didn't pitch it this way because all they cared about forever has been, I need to sell you product. I need to sell you hardware. And then we'll patch together some software along the way. By the way, every time you need something, I'm going to make it so crazy complicated that it's going to cost you $1 gazillion and you can't go to anybody else except for me. It's a completely broken model. What we're saying is, let us integrate everything, bring everything in, completely open, traditional software in the same way you use your email or whatever else you're using on your day-to-day uses. We're going to increase your revenue in the building. We're going to decrease your operating expenses. And if you want, we'll help you pitch your space to future tenants in a way that, again, a normal, non-techie, maybe even a non-crazy financial person can understand, which is, look, yes, I'm charging you $2 more for rent, but you're going to have your CAM charges come drastically down because your energy costs are going to be less, your overall utility costs are going to be less. The experiences that your team members have from the second they leave their house and get to the building, how they park, how they get to the elevator, how comfortable they are, the actual cleanliness of the air, making sure you're balancing that you can't do any of these things. Like, people talk about these all the time, but then you go, okay, how are you doing this? They're like, well, yeah, we take a look at the HVAC and we do that. Like, there's a recent company, I won't mention their name, just raised a ton of money, and they literally do nothing but look at the HVAC, which is the completely broken model, because it's like saying, I'm going to drive from A to B, and all I care about is that I know where I need to turn left or right, but I don't pay attention to the traffic lights. I don't pay attention to, whether people are walking in front of me. Like, none of that matters. I'm going to get there in the fastest possible way because it's a clean road. You can't do that. You need to take into your calculation. You need to take all this other data that comes from these other systems and make sure that you really have the technological capabilities to account for all this. We, again, back to my, we're willing to share this. Like, this is all completely open. If you look at the structure of our team, you actually see the resources and the people that have the experiences in these areas to be able to do real true machine learning, to be able to understand data in masses. Because we've brought, the way we've structured the company is we've brought the best of the best on the software side, the best of the best on the data science side, literally the best of the best from like a building engineering and understanding real estate side. When you combine all that, you now have something that nobody else in the space has. And, it sounds maybe a bit ignorant or bullish, but again, it's really easy. Like, we're willing to show it. We're willing to talk to people. We're willing to compare it to any other system, from literally IBM to Microsoft to Google to whoever you want, to the other startups, and go, look, let's take a building. You do what you do. We do what we do. Let's see how we drive this forward. And we're strong believers that that's the way to kind of incentivize all of us to push the limit, because we may run into a company that's doing something really cool and give us a great idea. The market is so big, none of us are going to own 100% of it, or even 20% of it.
Yeah, that's something I find interesting. Is like a couple things you mentioned is just the transparency aspect, right? The entire climate tech space to me is all about transparency, right? It's about showing kind of what's actually going down and finding out, how can we reduce these things by looking at it from the data perspective. But also I've noticed that obviously the competition aspect that typical business has is maybe a little bit less on edge with climate tech, because the whole goal obviously is to solve climate change, right? That's the issue, right? So people are more willing to be sharing, but they also want to at least get a good head start before they do. So this is interesting. Maybe one kind of final thing I'm interested in your perspective on is, what have you been seeing from the educational side of things, right? With people going through university to learn to even know about these types of jobs. Because to my knowledge, smart buildings has been a concept for a while. Probably it's evolved, especially in the past 5 or 6 years here. But I'm curious what you're seeing, or maybe what you're doing with working with universities, just to educate people on, hey, these are career paths for you, or just educating people in general and the public about, hey, have you thought about this or that within your building operations?
Yeah, so we work, we hire from some of the top universities around Michigan. As you know, Michigan is very, very strong, and the type of universities we have here. So you have University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State. There's a ton of great universities around us, and we've hired students from there. We're involved, both myself and my co-founder, as well as others on our team, are quite involved with different universities where we speak to these different groups and talk about them. As you stated, the industry has evolved. We're also hired from some of the top universities around Europe, and some of those people work for our office in Kosovo. So as the space is evolving, as there's more talk about it, from, again, you hear from like the president of the United States to all these different prime ministers and presidents on down now, talking about it, to your Bill Gates, obviously Elon Musk, all these guys. So the more noise that's being created in the space from like the top down, the more people are interested to see what's happening. You have people like, recently I think Bill Gates said that, the next $10 trillion companies, or whatever he said, are going to come from, from our space, right? So now you're seeing a lot more interest from the, I'll call it the younger generation in the space. We at KODE Labs are trying to continue to again, talk to these different groups. We get invited quite a bit, literally across universities from all over the place now. I don't think we're going to have, very soon, I don't think we're going to have a problem with people wanting, or like the talent pool, because people are very zoned in on this. And look, it's the right thing to do, right? Like we have to do this to help save the people, that come after us. It's just to like balance the universe. So I think at least what we're seeing is that more and more people are becoming interested to learn more about it. More and more people are actually looking to get in the space, and it's different sectors within the space. It's just, the hope, again, the hope is that from a national level or even a global level, we don't, because the problem, another problem here is that you have the larger companies have the money to do things like get in front of the right representatives. They have the lobbying dollars, right? So when they pitch this problem in front of, U.S. government or Canadian or wherever it may be, the pitch from them in comparison to the pitch from companies like KODE Labs, who are trying to completely do this different and actually have data to prove it, tens of millions of square feet that function in the exact same way I just spoke about here, are different. So now you're getting billions and billions of dollars allocated to things that may not necessarily be the things that are going to push this or to get us to achieve our goal in the fastest way. It'll help for sure. But if those funds are actually allocated to some of the other solutions that the big companies that have the lobbying money are not as good at, I actually think we'll reach our goal a lot faster. So it's that balance there. But the hope is that as new, going back to your initial question, as new generations get more involved in this space, and the public holistically becomes more educated in the space, that we'll see better decision making from the top down.
Yeah, this is something very interesting. I actually never had thought about that from the facilitator perspective, right? Obviously, I have seen a lot of companies talk about regulation and kind of how they promote those things, but I never thought about it from a perspective of they're probably going to bid for it in a way that's best for them to benefit and to help change, which is maybe there's some good out of it, right? But maybe it's not the best option. Just this idea of facilitating, kind of making things happen, because I think the information gap between these people is oftentimes very large, and there's not like a chief partnership officer or something like that who's like going out and finding these people and connecting them when they really should correlate these things together. So this is very fascinating to me.
I mean, it's crazy, right? Like if you think of again, like I look at what other spaces do, even again, the space I was in previous to KODE Labs, which is internet service companies, right? They used to not share anything with each other. Over time, they have learned that if they share with each other, their market share will actually expand, right? So whether it's sharing infrastructure, whether it's sharing information, well, there's a whole lot to talk about there, and I have a lot of strong feelings on that side. But in our space, right? Like today, you're putting regulation in that says, like, this is literally this is an actual example that says you have to have energy usage per square foot or whatever at this rate. So you're doing all this to force the owners to invest in the space. Great, phenomenal. But what you're not doing is putting regulation in that says every time you, the big hardware makers of the world, build this stuff, you have to have an open API, the ability to communicate with these other things, some normalization of data. You don't need to know the space in great detail, Tom. Like, you don't need to know what a VAB is to know that if things communicate in a way that is smooth, that has, that is a plug and play like other systems in the world communicate, it will be a faster pace to reaching our goal, right? So you're telling the owners they need to get the buildings to this, but you're not helping them by putting things in place with regard to the industry holistically. And I'm not saying like go and like regulate the industry like down to the greatest detail. I'm just saying just require that things are open. But what we're seeing, which is phenomenal, and we've been pushing this a lot, and we're going to continue to push it even harder, is that owners are now going, look, if you don't have this, you can't come in. So the great open economy kind of solving for itself.
Yeah.
So there's a balance there, but again, I think a little assistance in the right areas from the top could help speed this up in a way that I don't think is being talked about.
Yeah, I think that's always, regulation is a topic that's a super tough one because it goes back to the incentives, right? If you incentivize the people incorrectly, you might be just wasting a decade on something, right? Like I think the example is if you have a 4-lane highway and all the cars that exist can go 45 miles an hour, and you have one that goes 70, but they're on the same highway, that car is stuck in traffic, right? So I think it's interesting, but man, there's just been so many. To me, this whole space of transparency, IoT, climate tech, it all ties together so intricately. It's very interesting. So I really appreciate you coming on today. We're about out of time here, but I'm just curious, are there any final thoughts you wanted to offer to wrap up the show?
And I appreciate you having me, man. Really, and appreciate all you do for the space to try and get the word out and really help, I guess, educate the masses. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. It's phenomenal. So thank you for doing this. I know you do it because you're just passionate about the space. Thank you for having me here and KODE Labs. And the last thing is, look, if anybody that listens to this wants to actually just see what I just talked about, just reach out. Anybody on our team is willing to jump on a call. We don't need NDAs. We don't need any of that stuff. We're happy to just show you what we're doing because we think that the more people see and do this, the better the world is going to be long term.
Awesome. Very good. That's what we love to hear. Thanks so much for joining, Eddie. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one, man. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining on today's show. I hope you found a lot of value out of the conversation with Eddie. As always, would love to hear your thoughts. You can reach out to me directly on Twitter at Silas Maynor. You can join the Slack channel and discuss it there. We have a number of people in the space in our Slack channel that are just interested in kind of these things. We love to have conversations about it and share what we've learned, share other related media as well. And also want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Tigo Energy. So with Tigo, dare to be different with Tigo Energy, the leader in module level power electronics from Silicon Valley, has revealed the installer-focused energy intelligence residential solar plus battery storage solution. You can go to tigoenergy.com/CleanTechies for more information. That's tigoenergy.com/CleanTechies for more information. And as always, please do share this with friends. Share it with somebody. Typically, we ask to share it with somebody who is interested in the space, but also somebody who might be a denier of I guess just not a big fan of the space, but could find this very valuable and might change their mind. Always like to do that. As well, please do subscribe to the newsletter that comes out every month on the 27th. And again, you can support the show directly by going to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. But other than that, we really appreciate you joining us, and we will see you next time on CleanTechies, the podcast.